As the sun rises in the early morning, two girls are being taken somewhere in a carriage, but they barely know their location. But instead of worrying about the dragon outside, the girls worry about their bodies showing off more than they should. As the people carried a worrying look at the beast, the only words that came to their mind were pity and the vast emptiness of nature. The story begins with Ryoma and his old man training together with their samurai swords in the early morning. The training gets rather interesting when the old man realizes that his student tried to slash his throat, and they end up bickering along through the whole session. As they sit at the breakfast table, Ryoma gets hit by the old man's granddaughter on the head because of being rough and tough through the whole morning with her old man. The old man takes the chance to make the situation sticky and flirtatious by mentioning that they might be into each other, which she tries her best to deflect as she leaves for her classes. When Ryoma gets to school, he gets asked by everyone around him to join the karate club because of his tall physique and buffed body. But our guy seems to have taken an interest in being alone. He thinks of the old man and his words when it comes to sword fighting. So he moves and decides to stay clear from everyone as he would end up brutally beating someone in a battle. As he begins to enjoy his lunch alone on the rooftop of the school, some medieval soldiers end up surrounding him as he seems to have been summoned into another place. When the mage-looking guy thinks of putting a curse around our protagonist, he senses the killing intent and moves forward remembering the old man. While offering his food to the people ahead of him, he instantly takes one of them out and gets armed to mow down everyone around him. But the mage is not about to back up. He immediately holds onto his magic staff to pour thunder on his body to strike him down. Even that doesn't work out when Ryoma ends up using one of their men as a shield and protects himself from the attack. As the old mage gets knocked out on the ground, Ryoma begins questioning him about his whereabouts, and it seems that he is far away from his world and there is no return ticket for him. The silence from the old mage makes Ryoma realize that he cannot go back, and the old mage breaks his silence saying that he was summoned in here because he has the potential to absorb someone else's powers. While he is beating the heck out of the old mage, the granddaughter of the old mage, Celia, gets concerned about his well-being. Realizing that the situation is getting worse, she breaks through the confined walls where Ryoma is summoned to check out the situation. As they enter the place, Celia notices that her grandfather is dead and lying on the ground. They begin to check out the whole area only to find a sole survivor. But that survivor is none other than our Ryoma, who is playing around to escape from the place to build his reign as a supreme leader after coming from another world. When the situation cools down, Celia begins to think of the matter more carefully as it looks like someone might have beaten them out cold to death with bare hands. But no matter how many times the soldiers continue to look at the situation, it becomes more and more absurd each second. While Celia is meditating and Rolf is guarding her around, one of the soldiers brings the news of the incident that happened inside the infirmary. As the infirmary happens to be infested by fire and danger, the soldiers begin to call out for someone to help them out with their magical powers, and Orlando, who was wandering around the garden, slows down the fire with his magic. Even though she keeps questioning Orlando, he doesn't seem to know anything about the injured soldier who was taken into the infirmary. When she is most distracted, the old imperial doctor Ronbert arrives and explains that the injured soldier was the one who happened to annihilate Eren and caused this much ruckus this whole time. He explains that just like all the other times, he called out to Eren to treat the injured soldier since he was the sober one around the infirmary. As the old man ventures out of the room, the supposed body begins moving around to finish off everyone around him, including the knight and the nurse. The culprit, Ryoma, then moved on to Eren to subdue him to get out enough information to leave the place. After finding out, Ryoma lit fire throughout the whole building to have some time to escape from the infirmary. After hearing this, Celia gets desperate to gather her men and asks Orlando to help her out, and even Ronbert seems to agree with her changing stance. Once Celia begins to spread the urgency with her words, Orlando chants his magic to become as fast as light to teleport to Ryoma's location. Celia, on the other hand, stands back and thinks of performing the act of her late grandfather around the area to have an audience with the king to spread the news. As Ronbert continues to drink and sit down, Celia pops in front of the main gate of the king, claiming that she must meet him face to face. After threatening the knights out the door, she kneels in front of the king, but gets questioned by Doltnist, the chancellor, for her rough behavior. But the king realizes that the matter is rather important and decides to let her talk. And it seems that Lionel Eisenhart is somewhat of a competent ruler after all, instead of saying anything else beforehand. Celia instantly asks the king to be allowed to command the royal guard, which frustrates the chancellor a lot. When she is allowed to explain by the king, she explains that her grandfather was killed, which led her to request something this absurd. Even though Celia might have had a decent picture of her grandfather in her head, our guy, Ryoma, had quite the opposite thought inside his mind after looking at him and his despicable eyes. As Ryoma looks back at the time when he subdued Gyuzes, he remembers that he told him about the chance for the people of his world to become the ultimate warrior in this new kingdom. Even though it might be hard to gain strength by killing humans, his ultimate goal is to vanquish 100 dragons to get the strength of one. While Ryoma is sitting down in a pub to eat food after arranging the money off of the ones who managed to finish on the way, the lady of the pub comes ahead of him bringing 2 glasses of beer to share with him, even though he only thought of this world as a bad picture the whole time. Ryoma feels like the lady is rather different from the others he met on his way, as she thinks of him as a good guy. While chugging down the beer, they both continue to chat, only for Ryoma to sprout lies about his life, since he cannot be honest, and since he will be caught by the Imperial Guards at once. As they chat for a while, Ryoma asks the lady about the jobs around the place to keep himself afloat. After rummaging through the experience, she immediately thinks that working as a mercenary or an adventurer would be the best option for him since he knows how to use a sword. Ryoma gets curious about the newfound information. The lady explains that the only thing he needs to do is sign up through the bank and the guild to become an adventurer. Also, he doesn't need any kind of identification to become one, so the locations end up becoming the main target of our guy who looks forward to his new life. The lady bids farewell to our guy as he moves on and claims that he would be able to enjoy the place at night to drink through. As soon as he shows up in the guild, the lady in the reception is astonished, realizing that he is only 16 years old, and it turns into an awkward situation. She then moves on to explain the guild system briefly, and the guild organization with branches seems to be all over the continent. When she finishes explaining how the ranks work in this world, she moves on to explain the power absorption part, which our guy already knows about, since he has already experienced the same thing over and over after arriving in this world. When she mentions that the 7 is the highest level there is, Ryoma gets curious, but she prefers not to explain something to someone like him who is nothing but a newbie right now. While mentioning that he has a quest to subjugate a wild bee or a wild dog, which will get him a ranking 1 or higher, he thinks of something wilder because of his piquing curiosity. After looking at the papers, she mentions that there is something that someone with an F-rank person can accept. He calls in the location and thinks of the situation to be his calling, since he is a wanted person who needs to run away from the place no matter what. As he looks forward to the mission, Ryoma finds out that this world doesn't have the blades that he used to have back in his world and thinks of just using his bare hands. Hearing this kind of thing instantly angers the lady from the pub, since she didn't expect him to be this careless, and he thinks of taking her words into his heart to get better than that. While roaming around the blacksmithing shop, he looks forward to something handy, but the man gets angry, assuming that he is just a newbie hopping and poking around. As soon as he claims that the lady from the pub wanted her to visit the place, it gets rather interesting, and the man reveals a dagger that was created through a formula. The man instantly praises Ryoma for having a good eye for weapons. While talking about the weapons from another world, Ryoma finds out that the man has a whole lot of them, but not the one he intended to get, which was the katana. As he continues to look around and try a vast majority of them, Ryoma manages to select some of them and thinks of using them, as the old man used to show him around like his sensei. When he is fully prepared and ready to go, the lady asks him about the quest letter, and he doesn't seem to have it in the first place. An old man in the pub begins to question him about starting, and instead of bullying him around, he takes it rather normal to introduce Ryoma to everyone around him, so they end up welcoming him with a party to celebrate and drink like his own friends. At night, when Ryoma is busy rolling on his bed, he thinks of his instantly changing life through the past times he spent in this world, and realizes that he has to be careful. Even though a lot of them are trying to catch him, he thinks of only one lady who has a long braid and continues to roam around the place riding a royal horse. The only one he regards to be the queen in the first place, the one that's truly deserving. On the other hand, Shaldina Eisenhart, the first princess, seems to be looking for Ryoma this whole time, and she claims that she will end up finding the murderer even though she doesn't know his face, as if she can look into someone beyond that. When Shaldina gets on with withholding all the soldiers, Celia doesn't seem to understand what she is trying to do. Shaldina insists they continue in the morning instead of wandering around at night, even though she regards it as her final command. Celia decides to act up and forces Shaldina to command Orlando to take her away from there. When they leave, Rolf asks Shaldina about their destination the next day. Shaldina claims that she needs to move toward the east of their place to find the person wanted. But everyone else will have to continue moving to the south of the continent. Even though Rolf wonders if she would be right about her assumption, she leaves it up to the hunch she continues to have. She believes that her underling Sato will manage to do it along with her, but the idea of mobilizing a Delpho garrison doesn't seem to be suitable to her in any way. Now that the old man has died, nobody has stepped forward, which is what Shaldina is worried about since she feels like a storm is about to come at them eventually. On the other hand, Ryoma begins to continue through his part of adventuring, and after a bit of hunting the wild wolves, he manages to dull his sword. The receptionist is unable to believe that he managed to do something like that only with a sword and leaves the reward in his hands flabbergasted. As our guy thinks of the money he earned in a day, he realizes that he ended up making a lot more money than expected. When he notices that he has leveled up, he doesn't seem to be bothered since he realizes that he will get suspicions on his back. If that was not worrying enough, she piques his curiosity, claiming that his rewards will continue to double as he continues to level up. Instead of being too rough and brave about his future, he thinks of taking in the advice of the old lady from the pub who wanted him to be careful. He thinks of racking up healing potions, knowing that he will need them at one time or another. But the main issue is that he will need about 10 gold coins to purchase them, which is way out of his hands. Seeing that the whole situation is quite chaotic, he thinks of buying another sword in case he ends up making a rough shortcut somehow. On the other hand, an adventurer named Gorayes is busy bickering with his receptionist, saying that he is being stolen out of his rewards. While the receptionist explains that he ended up subjugating one of the robbers who was never marked as one of the Red Moon bandits, and when he understands that he couldn't prevent the girls from being kidnapped in the village, he simply walks away, understanding the situation. The receptionist at Ryoma's desk explains that even though Gorayes might be a rather sharp adventurer, he is about to pay the penalty for failing to meet the result of the quest since he is rather bad at investigating the matter first. Ryoma should be careful about that as well. The consequences seem to be heavy in the life of an adventurer. After following through the map of the forest, Ryoma begins to check out the bandits' location only to hear some whispering words in the distance while the silence is about to engulf the environment. The kidnappers have broken through the carriage and managed to kidnap 2 beautiful girls. They seem to be the Red Moon bandits the guild was looking for, and this whole thing is being watched by Ryoma, who is hiding in a bush to keep on watching them over to ambush them. Even though the girls protest and claim that they will end up biting their tongues to die, the bandits assume that it is not about to happen since they are slaves anyway. Just when one of them ends up touching their hands, the silver lining of the sword begins to spark in the air, and the rush of blood continues to splatter on the ground. When the others realize that they have been ambushed, Ryoma continues to course through them as well, while reddening the ground even more than before. When the bandits are all cleared out of that area, Ryoma speaks to the girls about their well-being, and they seem too shocked to even answer any of his questions. When he gets the ladies out of their misery, they worry about him bleeding through his cheeks. The duo introduces themselves as Laura and Sarah, and they seem to be twins as they simultaneously thank him. Even though the girls thank him, he thinks he is even the lowest of all the scums who tried to ruin them, as he had to wait until they dropped their pants to get to the weakest point of their life. Even so, the girls thank him anyway, knowing that the whole thing could have been worse if the guys could get what they wanted. After looking at their bodies, Ryoma realizes that the bandits had to react like that as nobody could control their urges after seeing them. As he could build up some Arabic references by seeing their dresses, he asks them about their surnames, but they do not seem to have any last name since they are slaves. When Ryoma is asked about his name, he utters a fake name to foreshadow his real identity, and they continue to chat about their next plan. As they are asked about their next move, the only thing they know is that they cannot move out. Instead of speaking with their master who had run away, The bandits appear out of nowhere. The whole thing goes over Ryoma's head as he listens to them, and knowing that the master is about to take his time coming to find them, he thinks of cleaning up the area and the bodies so the monsters do not follow them. As he gets on with cleaning up the area, one of the bandits begins to ride the horse and keeps on charging forward, saying that he will end up finding him when he rejoins with his whole gang. Around that area, he notices an expensive healing potion rolling around, which means that it must be the only reason why the bandit is alive. One of the twins asks him to cut a small wound on his left hand's pinky finger quite urgently, saying that she doesn't have much time, and he decides to listen to her. As soon as he does that, she starts beginning some kind of vocal ritual as if she is praying. As soon as some kind of contract forms between them, the shackles start disappearing and she starts calling him her master. This whole time, Ryoma continues to watch him as if there is no way this is happening ahead of him, and the girl ends up using magic to cut down the bandit who is currently running away riding the horse. As Ryoma looks at the situation, he feels like the old man who he finished off had the same magic, and one of the attacks ends up hitting the bandit's horse, and he manages to fall off with Sarah, leaving them with an opportunity to catch up. Laura thinks of getting back to her sister, but Ryoma feels like they will never be able to do so since they are already 1 kilometer away from their current location. But she instantly chants the magic of the spirit of the wind, calling out the wind protection to make them fast. As soon as Laura holds hands with Ryoma, they whoosh like they are some kind of superhumans and end up reaching the location of Sarah in 1 second. When Ryoma doesn't seem to know about the magic she has been using, she thinks that it is rather suspicious since someone who is this expert in martial arts must know about magic at this point. When Sarah doesn't know what they should be doing with the bandit whose leg is stuck under the horse, Laura decides to leave it under the care of Ryoma as he is the current master. As he decides to finish him off, the guy begins to sprout a lot of nonsense while threatening him in various ways, but none of it works out as Ryoma decides to push the knife through his throat. Even so, the duo thinks that it would have been useful if they managed to gather information from him before he died, and he insists that they shouldn't think of believing in what a thief says in any way. As time passes and they continue to chat, Ryoma is weirded out by the fact that they are claiming him to be their master, and Laura reminds him that they have already formed a blood contract. But that didn't happen with Sarah since she is still in her shackles. Ryoma is unable to process anything in his mind since everything is rather new to him at this point. As he doesn't seem to agree, they assume that he might hate them, but the situation is quite the opposite from Ryoma's standpoint. After a lot of bickering, Ryoma agrees with them forming another blood contract, but he insists that the girls will have to explain everything to him when they reach the nearby town to take shelter. After walking down the road, they move toward the carriage and Ryoma notices that the same person who fled leaving Sarah and Laura, their previous master, has been hiding inside it the whole time. As the previous master begins to move closer and starts getting his hands all over them, Laura starts moving the knife around, warning him that she will end up stabbing him if he continues to act like a pervert. The old merchant starts calling them goods and Ryoma asks them about the old man, and they agree with the fact that the old man used to be their master even though he has always been the main enemy. As Ryoma begins to move, the old man starts to sputter a lot of nonsense, and in a mere minute, Ryoma has already thrown his chakra into his head, and the girls have taken the initiative to slash him with their swords into his stomach. Even though Ryoma thinks of asking them about a lot of things, he decides to wait for the time until they arrive at the nearby town, Aru. At the end of the situation, Ryoma feels like he might have mingled himself into a whole lot of mess trying to save someone. As they arrive at the inn, Ryoma waits for the girls to get out of the shower, and after some time they finally finish. But none of them seem to agree to the fact that they should be eating at the same table as their master with basic slave manners. But our guy is too distracted seeing them half-naked wearing their towels, and he ends up forcing them to put on some clothes after a lot of insisting. Even after pressing them for quite some time, none of them agree with the fact that they will end up eating at the same table as their master, as if it is about to ruin their whole world. They have never experienced eating hot food once in their whole life, making it look like a book filled with terrible experiences. But Ryoma manages to use his command to make them sit at the same table as him, and Ryoma reminisces how he used to eat food with the old man and his granddaughter back in the days in his previous world. They finally get to the table and start eating, and Ryoma feels like they are too awkward around him. Instead of dwelling on his thoughts, Ryoma begins chatting with them about the blood oath they formed previously, and they explain that they are used as combat slaves, which kind of shocks him. The term combat slaves continues to buzz through his mind, and the girls explain that the combat slaves are purely made for pleasure and battles. But the main thing about them is that their powers are sealed through the chains around them, so they cannot use their powers against their master, which would indefinitely mean rebelling against them, even though the whole situation feels rather absurd as they were independent while forming a contract. Laura decides to explain the whole thing better to him so he can understand what the reality behind them is. According to them, their family name is Malfist, and their family lineage has served as senior knights for the Queef Kingdom near the west coast of the central continent. Even though they are nobles, 5 years ago, in the middle of the war with the Shada Kingdom over disputes about tariffs, their chancellor ended up betraying them, which ended up leading to the downfall of Queef Kingdom. They were supposed to escape on a ship disguised as a cargo ship, but even their guard managed to double-cross them, even though he was trusted for a long time by the family. They were later sold to the slave trader named Azosu, and they explained how betrayal led them to where they are currently. Even though they didn't get the knowledge of forming contracts with someone, their father was the one who revealed it, saying that it might continue to be useful to them someday. As Ryoma listens to it, he assumes that their father could have predicted this whole thing to happen any day at some point. Also, when Ryoma thinks that there must have been some kind of connection between him and the contract, they explain that the reason why they approached him was because they managed to trust him through thick and thin. The idea of him protecting them through everything manages to get their trust, and Ryoma decides to leave them as free as they can be, and even thinks of leaving the money he could get from the trader in the carriage. But the girls instantly reject that idea, saying that it doesn't abide the rule of their family in the first place, and it will end up ruining the words they have promised. Just when Ryoma thinks it cannot get any weirder, the girls seem to know about him coming from another world, too, realizing that there is no other way to face the situation instead of being honest. He opens up in front of them while explaining everything that has happened to him until now. Even so, he doesn't want someone to become his slave and feels like they will be better off living with their free will in the first place. When they think of agreeing, Ryoma explains that he will have to return to his world one day or another, but the girls insist that they will continue to live with him until he returns to his world. The sisters even think of going back to his world and get excited. At night, Ryoma manages to get a nightmare about bringing Sarah and Laura back to his world while they are in deep sleep. As the night passes, they once again start running through the outside world, and the first thing that comes into Ryoma's mind is that he needs to cross the border to avoid suspicion. He instantly begins to check through the local shops where the jewels and gems are being sold, and all the eyes are on him for bringing these precious items at once. When the appraisal prices of all the gems and jewels come out, the calculations seem to be 3,000 gold coins. After seeing his reaction, the shop clerk feels like he might be shouting because of the absurd pricing, but instantly realizes that he is too shocked to even assume that he would get this much in the first place. She instantly gets ready to arrange the money for Ryoma, and the idea of the woman smiling kind of gets through his mind as he starts passing the area with his new companions. Even though he managed to sell all of the jewels, Ryoma kept 2 twin rings for both of them, and it makes Laura and Sarah realize how he thinks of them. At night, when they are at their shelter, Ryoma thinks of going through all the plans, and the girls assume that being safe wouldn't hurt any of them at this point, since the royalists are witch hunting at this point. Since they have blocked the eastern border, they cannot move through there, and they will have to continue through the northern forest, instead of thinking about traps. Ryoma thinks that he will manage to show Shaldina who's being hunted in the first place, as if he has some utter motives going on through his mind right now. At the same time, Shaldina and her underling get on to brainstorm about the intention of the killer and think of planting a trap deep inside the forest. Also, Shaldina thinks that they will be fine through it all along, since she knows a way to know if someone came from another world. Just after some time, Ryoma meets the underling of the first princess, and he starts acting rather friendly toward him, adding that he is not abandoned after all. Even though the tension keeps peeking through the roof, the underling thinks of being friendly toward him to take him off guard. After some time, Ryoma decides to leave some food for the man since he smelled it all the way, and the underling advises that Ryoma shouldn't be going through the forest alone as it is filled with danger. Sato explains that he is the vice captain of the succubus knights of the Otome Empire, But instead of focusing on that, Ryoma just offers him food. Satao explains the main reason why he is in the forest and asks him to follow him back to their camp, which he immediately agrees to. When Ryoma finally arrives, Sai-tu explains to the princess that Ryoma has the same smell as him, but she still wants to go through the process to verify his identity. As Sato and Shaldina come around, Ryoma feels like the shackles are a bit too much for the situation he is in right now, but things start to roll around like a storm when Shaldina makes her entrance. As soon as Ryoma notices her, he begins to act rather familiar with her, and even though he tries his best to move the suspicion away from himself, she points out that he is the person they have been looking for. After going through a small amount of interrogation, Ryoma decides to clear the blurriness in the middle and reveals that he is surely someone from another world. Even Sayo seems to be someone who came from another world, as he was summoned to this world 10 years ago. Even though Shaldina knows that it would have been a whole different picture if Ryoma decided to go along with them, she knows that there is no going back after what has happened. Even so, Seitu feels like something must be off since Ryoma doesn't seem to be nervous and there is not a shakiness in his voice, even though he knows that he might end up dead. Instead of focusing on his fate, Seitu gets out his sword almost instantly and starts asking what Ryoma wants to say in the end as his last words. But Ryoma gets ready to reveal his cunning side, saying that they are the ones who will die, and almost instantly, Sarah and Laura begin their work cutting through the tents like a tornado. The length of the magical powers begins to make Seitu feel like he will lose his mind, and both of the girls tend to look after their master. The girls are feeling into the thing that they are truly slaves to their master, and the fact that Laura is dealing with the others continues to overwhelm Ryoma. Both of the girls stand between Ryoma and Shaldina as she begins to question their identities, and Shaldina realizes that they are more capable than enough. Even though one would think of falling back and fleeing, the girls think Ryoma should get the chance to annihilate the royalties to gather fame in their favor. No matter what, Ryoma is not ready to sacrifice any of them and claims that they need to fall back to save themselves. Realizing the situation, Shaldina asks Seitu to release his weapon, and Ryoma feels like they are about to ease up at this point while letting go. When Ryoma is about to run away, Sayo asks Ryoma if he has been a mafia of something in Japan, but the idea of being questioned about something like this goes over Ryoma's mind. Even though one would hesitate to kill someone according to Seitu's knowledge, Ryoma remarks that he would never make a single mistake against someone who wants to hunt him down, as he only chooses to fight when he determines to kill someone. When they are about to leave, Shaldina remarks that he cannot live like this, as the Empire will end up uniting to clash with him one day. It only leaves him with the idea of returning to his world, and Ryoma and the girls travel to Doshu Desert hoping that they will be able to gather goods. But they are approached by a huge sandworm which starts chasing our guy down like a hunter. As Ryoma sees that the worm is showing its back toward him, he feels like it might be openly inviting him, as if it's making him feel confident to strike him down almost instantly. He instructs the girls not to move from there, and a minute later, he decides to strike it down and fight back to make sure that they are about to get out of their situation unharmed. When the monster is taken down, the girls ask him to deal with the last blow, but he doesn't seem to have any interest in that. Even so, the girls haggle, knowing that he will need to absorb the energy because he can do better than them in the first place. As time passes, he thinks of returning to his world, and then he deals with the entity on the ground. But in Myris, when he gets to meet one of the high-ranked magicians named Animaria, she reveals that he doesn't have a way to go back to his world. According to her, the three summoning magic end up working as a summoning ability, as the summoners must offer their prana to the god. The idea of him wasting this much time to hear something like this begins to shatter his heart, and she takes the initiative to explain what has been going on there. According to her, the three summoning magic end up working as a summoning ability, as the summoners must offer their prana to the god. Even though it is done to the god of the world, they are to summon someone. Ryoma will need to offer it to the god of his world instead of returning. After confirming that, Ryoma thinks of the names of the gods in his world, and as he is busy bickering about all those ideas, Animaria lets her get his hands on the book, which has kept information about the people who wanted to return to their world like Ryoma. After the revelation of the idea that the book has been manipulated for 100 years now, Ryoma feels like he might be losing his mind staying in this place. The only good thing about staying in this world for Ryoma is that he seems to be capable of handling himself to keep himself safe. Even the girls are unable to process Ryoma's calm mind while dealing with Sheldina and how he managed to save them back in time. The idea of being a slave in this world after coming from Earth makes Ryoma feel bitter about the whole situation, and even the girls start worrying about how the weak-minded people are coping with everything they are being handed out in the first place. Instead of thinking about only himself, Ryoma seems to think about the others who were made into slaves, and now the anger is pouring out of his mind. His sole anger is enough to burn down the whole world, and they wonder if he will be okay on his own. Ryoma is unable to cope with this vast loneliness, and the thoughts of dealing with his anger make him feel rather empty. In the blackness of his mind, he meets an old man looking like Zeus and claims that the possibility of returning is not zero, but he will have to make work for that. The old man orders him to take what's his and blame the one who summoned him in here in the first place, adding that he has the potential to destroy the whole world. Just when he is about to lose himself, the girls smother him with their warmth, and he returns to his mind. They managed to break through the door as he was screaming, and Ryoma felt better than ever. When he goes to meet the homeowner, he realizes that the girls are not eating since he was forcing himself not to eat the whole time. After getting to know that he is being charged for the broken door, he confronts the girls knowing that they didn't eat anything since he locked the room. The girls beg him not to lose his mind in anger, and Ryoma cannot help but become emotional after hearing about their pleading. In the end, everything was fine as they ended up regaining their composure through positivity and laughter. Ryoma and the girls then start hunting down monsters they can find, and they start asking him the reason why he took his hands off Azos's money and continued to adventure like the others. The main reason is that he wanted to find the meaning of his life right now, and taking the trip like a warrior seems to be the goal in the first place. The lessons that he learned from the old man from his world seem to make sense to him, but they make him feel at home as they are beside him even if he doesn't have family anymore. While meeting the guild master Vols Heinkel, he seems to have some kind of discussion with them because of the lack of personnel. He seems to be having multiple thoughts about dealing with the goods that a bunch of merchants want protection, as they will be traveling from their current location to Road Syria Kingdom. The refusal will result in their license being revoked, so there is no other way around to deal with the matter. The idea of making the travel safe leaves Ryoma and the girls with a bunch of heavy materials and a high-paying balance with some mercenaries who will continue to go along with them. They soon meet the mercenary named Lion who will be guiding the mercenaries, and she introduces him to her right arm Balls, who seems friendly. Later on, they get to meet the merchants, and the main issuer seems to be carrying a lot of people with him. The merchant is surprised to see the girls being battle slaves, and when he starts speaking about finding a better master, Ryoma starts hiding the girls behind the shield from a creep like him. Even though one would more likely listen to him, Ryoma starts holding his throat to make him sputter the truth behind the whole mission, as he feels like he is lying to their faces. Ryoma instantly reveals the thoughts to Lion and Balls, and even they begin to wonder what kind of trap it must be. It would be wise to cancel the trip almost immediately. She thinks that they must have to go through it anyway, since the mercenaries are supported by the guild directly. The target in this situation can be Ryoma, and Lion thinks of calling in a few more people from Crimson Lion, which Ryoma immediately refuses to do so as he has to deal with his problems. The idea of him wasting the lives of others makes him feel rather empty. Even Lion and Balls are shocked to hear something like this, the pure portrayal of a good guy. When the situation calms down, Lion comes around Ryoma asking what will happen if she is the target in this mission, as she is the captain of a mercenary group. She becomes extra friendly to him, which brings the girls to shield him from her, and Lion thinks of drinking with them for the time being. After a lot of bickering, they end up preparing for their travel in the morning, and just like Ryoma thought, the enemies begin to pour in with bows and arrows in their direction. Lian and her men realize that they are being chased by a lot of cavalries behind them, and Ryoma worries that they are targeting him, as this must be a trap coordinated by the Otomiya Empire. Ryoma immediately asks Sara to eject the carriage and try to keep it all steady, and thinks of taking the chance to create some distance between them. Soon enough, the merchants seem to be chasing them from the other side, holding swords in their hands with no way around it. But everything blows down when he notices that both of the groups are fighting among themselves. Previously during the night, they ended up having a conversation about what could happen in the future at their expedition, and Ryoma left the matter to handle when they were being assaulted directly instead of making a plan right there. All he knew was that they were supposed to carry the merchants, so they were not the wanted criminals. The other group might be targeting Lion or him, so attacking them first would make the other group criminals in this situation. Also, Masara, as a merchant, will be more likely to find somewhere vacant to attack them in the first place, which was why Ryoma believed that he would never manage to bring a huge army to attack them all. At the same time, using all the geographical advances was the main target of Ryoma. But Bulls worried if they chose somewhere random, it would be rather problematic. Ryoma thinks that they will be fine as he marks the valley near Road Syria's border, which seems suspicious to him. The entire mountain path is a no-brainer to him. While they are discussing the matter, Saito keeps coughing as if Ryoma is remembering him. Since they have managed to reaffirm their management through the attack of the previous night, they think of fighting through the merchants to get out of the situation. But the matter gets heavy when thinking of the enemies that didn't seem to target them originally, but Ryoma allows them to go through the initial plan instead of changing it. On the other hand, the knights who came around to attack realize that the carriage they have been carrying is empty, shouting that the witch has managed to escape. The idea of finding a witch blows Ryoma's mind. It seems that Ryoma made a plan with Laura last night, that she would have to make the trap for the enemies rushing toward them so they would be distracted with the most obvious option because of her magic. But the whole situation will play out differently. While Bowles has been accompanying Laura out in the mountains, the merchants start to guide the armies to chase Ryoma and the girls down. Ryoma realizes that the merchants are neither their enemies, nor allies, nor the goons who were sent by the Empire. Just like that, he decides to remove all the traces to prove that they were there originally and asks Sara if she likes that merchant. When he confirms her hate towards that fat man, he instantly asks the same question to Lion, who says the same thing, if not worse. Almost immediately, Ryoma moves forward with Sarah and all the others and asks Laura to work on her magic, knowing that the enemies are just at the back, so they need to perform it immediately. Almost in an instant, the bamboo rocks begin to shroud through the paths so that the enemies cannot continue to chase them. Even though all of them are trapped, Masara the merchant seems to be well and alive, and Bowles finds out the number of alive ones in the meantime. When Masara starts threatening him, Ryoma reveals that he is suspected from the beginning, and no matter what he does right now, he wouldn't be considered a betrayer since they decided to pull out the swords. Then Masara moves on the whole thing toward the Road Syria Knights, and he explains that he is nothing but a slave merchant, and even starts bribing Ryoma to leave him alone. After reaching through the whole situation by using his mind, Ryoma moves on to the knight who has been captured, instigating that the person they have been looking forward to becoming their next heir is in front of him, none other than Laura. When it comes to the introduction of Laura, she is asked for her last name by the knight, and Ryoma knows that it will be a worrisome matter if she ends up revealing the real one. Instead of twisting the matter, Ryoma claims that the family name is Mikoshiba and he is her younger brother. Even though the knight feels like it will be better to finish him off right now, Ryoma decides not to go along the path to prove that he is not their enemy. Instead of finishing him off, Ryoma holds his neck on the line, adding that Sarah will be the one to question him about his intentions since he was sent by the nobles in the first place. After interrogating the man for a while, Ryoma realizes that his suspicion was correct the whole time, as there is desperation happening in the king's absence. The difficult questions seem to be fair in front of Ryoma, and the idea of finishing Laura and Sarah seems to be applicable, which one would normally think of. As the situation calms down, Lion insists that they were used as bait, and the main reason behind them is the guildmaster who decided to double-cross them. Bowles thinks of reporting it to another guild, but Lion doesn't approve of that since they have no concrete proof in their hands. Ryoma agrees with her, and the reasonable sequences continue to lead through the situation, as accepting the bribe would have been the only truth in everything right now. Curiously, Ryoma asks what Bowles ended up using on Masara, as he is not someone who would like to open his mouth. He claims that the only thing that he used was a twig, as he kind of shoved it upwards to one vulnerable part. Suddenly, the knight begins shouting, adding that Laura is not the correct princess, as she must be someone fake sent by the nobles, adding that the real rightful heir is none other than Lupus. Assuming that their plan has formed better than it was supposed to, Ryoma reveals that they have been deceiving him the whole time since he wanted to match the story. It seems that when the death took away the king, Princess Lupus started preparing for her coronation after receiving a piece of information about the appearance of a girl bearing the same bloodline as the king in the neighboring country. When the illegitimate child was considered to be the heir, the will of people supporting that person became rather heavier than ever. The only information about that girl was that she had silver hair and was in her mid-teens, while the nobles continued to take advantage of the knight's fraction. This is how they managed to follow through the paths of Ryoma and the others, and this whole time, the child they were trying to prevent from entering the country might have already been transported. Lion explains that the knight fraction ended up taking the bait this whole time. Laura was the one portrayed as the illegitimate child to make their target come true. They find out that they even managed to hire Masara to take care of the knights to gain favor from the nobles, making it far worse. Instead of finishing off the knight, Ryoma releases Mihail, saying that they might be able to help out each other. On the other hand, Lupus finally arrives at the hallway of the royal palace and Ryoma arrives with Mihail in front of her. The situation gets even stickier as he believes that he might get under her suspicion. They are now faced in front of Lupus and she is disappointed by the fact that they couldn't find success in their mission. Assuming that they are in a tough position, Laura begins to speak with her master, but Ryoma asks her to do it while closing her mouth the whole time. While looking around, Ryoma notices a girl and wonders if she is the same person they have been looking for this whole time. And the reasoning why Mihail is one of the last honest subjects starts to irritate him. The matter escalates when Lupus claims that she will have to execute Mihail after that, but she decides to hold off on the matter for now as she can guess the nobles are busy plotting something. She gives Mihail another chance to redeem himself, and he promises that he will never disappoint her ever again. Ryoma thinks that she might be fair after all since she made a sane decision, and the sisters are then introduced to the princess along with their real names. Just when Lupus is thinking, the suspicious girl points out that the illegitimate child doesn't have a sister and Lupus becomes interested in knowing more about the twins later on. Lupus then allows Ryoma and the sisters to live with them for now, and she decides to informally apologize to Ryoma for getting them into their internal issues. Just when Ryoma points out that Lupus might have 0 chances to be the next heir, the girl knight from before comes in to slice his throat. When she leaves, Ryoma explains that he will bring victory in her regard, and they start gathering funds to make the princess the real winner. When Ryoma enters Lion's room, she seems to be busy drinking while Balls is just chatting with her. Since they are comrades right now, Ryoma makes it clear that he wants to hire mercenaries, even 100 of them. Instead of budging and confusing about the price, Ryoma claims that he will bring 300 gold coins the next day, and they seem to plan for the battle that awaits for them. Meanwhile, in the imperial capital of Old Tomea, the noble seems to be excited about leaving for Rhodes, Syria, since he assumes that it might be the perfect time to decide what will happen to its fate. Then the next day, Ryoma seems to have a good party with Count Alan Bergston and Count Elnan Zelf, while annoying the female knight Meltina the whole time. Even the girls are supporting their master in this situation, and it is rather surprising to Meltina how Alan ended up deciding to support Lupus in the first place, which Meltina never expected to hear in a lifetime. Along with him, Count Elnan agrees to support the princess along with many others at the same time, and Meltina believes that there must be some kind of justification going forward in their future. They are not working for free, but they are agreeing to be supportive in exchange for more land and positions of ministers since he has Masara to go through all the details for him. Ryoma points out that the matter is beneficial to them since a feudal lord joining the royal guard would mean a lot to them. Knowing that the civil war could cause a bigger imbalance in the environment, Ryoma explains that none of the counts will have to be affiliated with any of the military authorities. Meltina claims that there is no need to get involved with General Horam, and Laura start supporting Ryoma and his thoughts, knowing that they have the best deal ever right now in front of them. Late at night, when Metlina comes out of the room dressed up, Ryoma is unable to recognize her, and she claims that the slaves and count's maids forced her to dress like this all of a sudden. Knowing that the girls might be bothering her, Ryoma apologizes to her for the incidents that are happening. They begin to discuss the matter of Hadram holding the military authority in his hands, and no matter how they look at it, he doesn't seem to be obedient to the princess. On the other hand, he left the duty of convincing all the other neutral nobles to the princess's side to Count Alan. When they think of someone who could go against Hadram, Elnan claims that the person has to be Elena Steinar, who is the previous commander-in-chief, even though she came from a commoner family. Her retirement plan was rather sudden, as one day she just decided to leave it all out of her life, and there seems to be some kind of feud between her and General Hodrum. It seems that the way Hodrum decided to get the power was by holding Elena's husband and daughter hostage in the first place. At the road, Syria's suburbs, Ryoma goes on to meet Elena along with Meltina, who seems rather excited to meet Elena out of nowhere. Elena seems to know about the identity of Ryoma, and Ryoma instantly asks her to help to assist in the war by joining the princess's side. Instead of being directly working alongside Hodrum, Ryoma asks Elena to be the princess's advisor. When the situation turns rather rough, Ryoma asks Meltina to leave to let him and Elena have some space between them. And that is when Elena reveals what happened on that day. Even though the world thought the hostage situation went well, Elena found her husband's head on the stairs and never actually found her daughter. Now that the blurriness has cleared up between them, Elena asks Ryoma to take revenge on Hodrum for. When Ryoma leaves the room, Meltina realizes that Ryoma seems rather down, and the fate that her daughter had in the end ended up marking inside his brain. As Ryoma begins to leave with Meltina, Elena realizes that she might finally end up finding justice after all this time. Someone like Ryoma has the potential to be the hero who brings justice to the people who wronged her. Back at the residence, Ryoma begins to think of the time when Chinese superiors went against the Turkish army, and he used to hear a lot about that time from the old man. He soon regains consciousness as Sarah starts talking back at him as if he is too deep down in his roots. Leon gets busy teasing one of the girls and just gets back from handling the mercenaries after leaving them to balls, determining the fact that the first princess needs to win no matter what. They then further talk about Ryoma and why Laura is busy gathering water from the well, and the fact that Ryoma is too soft becomes more of a reflection. While conversing about that, Laura becomes more emotionally weak to the fact that Ryoma is too gentle towards them, as he is still finding no way to trust them properly. While the girls are chatting with each other, Laura explains that she fears that her master will be killed one way or another, and it seems that he has been dueling with the higher-ranking mercenaries. The A-rank mercenary continues to target Ryoma to blast him and begins talking badly to him, adding that he is nothing without his escorts. While dueling, Ryoma advises the mercenary not to make it flashy and advises to make it more profitable for him when he uses too much energy. Just when the madman-like mercenary is taken off guard by the insult left by Ryoma, he takes the chance to suplex him on the ground. When the girls start rushing into the errand fearing for their master, Balls claims that he has no permission to let them in since the warriors decided to fight with their conscious mind. On the other hand, the mercenary decides to depend on his magical powers, and he seems to now have the specialty of Ryoma with karate for some reason. When Ryoma realizes that the man is about to put his grandfather in shame, he decides to smash him on the ground once again, placing himself as the victor of the duel. As soon as the fight ends, he asks Balls to take care of the warrior, knowing that his life might be in danger. The girls rush at him as they are vastly worried, and he explains that he intends to make the duel profitable by putting the nearby assassins in shambles. People start to talk more about him from there, and even Leon thinks that he might have done something good by making a scene like that. Leon explains that both of the girls are loved. They assume that it is fine either way since they are slaves. Laura understands the importance of the war. While looking into the eyes of her master, she promised to stay with him until it all ended.